All right. So I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I want to have a conversation about my experience with bipolar disorder. So I thought today I'd come out to one of my favorite spots and I would just sit down in some good light and talk about what things have been like for me since I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, how my life has changed, what things have been different for me, and this will be part of a 3-part series. The next part will be about being hospitalized with bipolar disorder, and the third and final part will be about life after hospitalization, um, life after hospitalization, and working with my family, working with counselors, working with psychiatrists and therapists, and just what the world has felt like after being diagnosed. So for part one, we're talking about the diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So I'll give you a little background on me. I'm from beautiful Hamilton, Ohio, home of Joe Nuxall, baseball player for the Cincinnati Reds, and the city of Sculpture, at one point the world's best water. And I was in scouts, I was on swim team, I was in art, I performed in the high school plays and the talent show. I was the MC and I did some stand-up. And then I went to Ball State, started undecided, and went for a creation of my own degree, human organization and communications. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the sunset. It's just beautiful out here. But didn't want this to be a hard talk. I think people get really hard to communicate with and really confused about how to handle conversations around mental health, or what people call mental illness. I like to refer to it as neurological diversity, because each of us here on earth are operating with an N of one as far as our neurological makeup. Things affect us differently: emotions, people, social constructs, technology, substance. Everything's a part of the way people interact with the world. And today I just want to talk about, kind of beating around the bush a bit, but talk about what my experience with and diagnosis of bipolar has been like. So I was 19 and I was at Ball State, and some of this I can look back and it's almost funny. I never hurt anyone. I never hurt myself, but I had a manic episode when I was 19, and my roommates started noticing that I was up all night. I wrote an entire album of music. I painted an abstract painting. I was training for a triathlon, so I had about I was biking about 7 miles or 14 miles and running about 14 miles, training to run 14 miles for a half marathon. So I was running, probably about 14 miles a week, and biking about 7 miles a day, and then swimming a mile to try to train for this triathlon. I was doing my full course load of 18 credit hours at Ball State. I just created my own degree, so I was in a master's level class. It was awesome. That was my design thinking and innovation methods class. And then I was working for a professor, Gary Pavlechko. He was in ed tech at Ball State, and I just started talking rapidly at work. I would turn my music on really loud, and he would ask for me to turn it down. I would keep it up, and I was just kind of agitated, not able to sit in my seat. And Gary had experience with students who had probably mental health breakthroughs in the past, and he contacted my parents, as well as, I think the same night, my good friend Christopher Subler contacted my parents, and they basically just reached out and said, hey, we think Bobby's not right. We think he might be on drugs. We think something's going. The professor kind of he didn't say anything about that sort of thing, but my roommates just didn't know what was going on. They didn't know how to make sense of my incredible energy, my agitation, just the total sudden change in my human experience and the way I was interacting. And it must have been around that time that Gary called my mom and asked her if he could take me over to the counseling center there at Ball State. And my mom was kind of worried at first, but she knew that bipolar had run in my family. My grandmother on my mother's side had bipolar and had been, had a pretty rough experience with it. But with Gary, one day he said, hey, I think we need to go to the counselor's office. And I remember asking Gary, well, Gary, I don't know what's going on. Can you write something down? I asked him to draw a picture, and I said, Gary, can you draw me a picture? Because I don't know what's going on. And Gary was like, Bobby, I'm not an artist. And I said, well, at least write a word for me. And he wrote the word meadow on a Post-it note. And I can remember meditating on that word. And I was interacting so differently with people at this time. It's even almost hard to look at the camera because this feels like the break in who I was and the transformation into someone different or someone who experiences life differently. I just want to make sure the lighting's good. I haven't checked this, but I don't really want to film this again. Might get out my camera for the next video, but it's kind of convenient to just vlog on this phone that I have in my pocket all the day. So anyway, Gary takes me over to the counselor's office. That 70s show was on in a large TV screen, and I remember thinking I was signing up for that 90s show. There had been a Second City performance, and they were doing improv, and they said to watch David Letterman, and David Letterman had Ashton Kutcher on that night, and he was talking about that 90s show, so I thought that's what was happening. Those are the types of loose connections that you make when you're manic. So Gary got me to the counselor's office. I remember signing the paperwork thinking I was signing up for a television network. And then I went home. After talking to the counselor, they, had assessed me as probably dealing with bipolar mania. And I stayed with my aunt for a couple nights, taking sleeping medication that her friend had prescribed, and it helped me get to sleep. And then I remember seeing a doctor who prescribed me Abilify. And believe it or not, Abilify is a antidepressant, so it actually sent me further into mania. When I was running, if I saw black cars, I thought they were the government coming to take me. I was getting paranoid. Anytime I saw an R, I thought it was an R for Robert, and I would go towards that R like a moth towards the flame, just moving in ways that were unconscious that couldn't really help me. And finally, I got connected to the Linder Center of Hope and Dr. Dowling, and he helped me find my medication, talk to me about my diagnosis of bipolar 1, which the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 are bipolar 1 is a longer lasting depression and mania cycle. Bipolar 2 can be rapid cycling, so maybe about 2 weeks or a week of mania and then a week of depression, so just more rapid cycles. After talking about my diagnosis, I got on medication, and for about 5 years, I took my medication consistently until I was 25 and I was working at a consultancy, and that's when we'll pick up. I'll start talking about Seek, the consultancy that I worked at, and how my life started to change, and the things that I brought into my life that made me experience things differently once I was bipolar. thanks for catching my first vlog, and let's get one more view of the sunset.